Oh, yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. A leather jacket and a cowboy hat. Also known as the sickest outfit that Franky has ever worn in this story, and I hope he wears it throughout all of Elbaph. Don't get me wrong. Franky getting a cool Viking costume change, running around with a huge battle axe, that would look cool, like Barbarian Franky. But I just want him to rock the leather jacket and the chain and the cowboy hat. I mean, I think it looks great on him, right? Now, the only cowboy hat I own is Ace's right here. But Franky could rock Ace's cowboy hat. In fact, remember back at Dressrosa when they found out the Maramarinomi was the prize in the Colosseum, Luffy was like, I don't want anybody to have it. Now, I can't have it because I have my devil fruit. Franky, do you want the Maramarinomi? He was totally cool with Franky having his brother's devil fruit. So if Luffy would have picked up Ace's hat at Marineford after he was killed, maybe there would have been a really cool moment where Luffy's like, Franky, you are my trusted Nakama. You are our shipwright. You built our ship of dreams, the Thousand Sunny. I would be honored if not only you had my brother's flame fruit, but you also took his trusty cowboy hat. A little tear rolls down Franky's face like, thank you, Luffy. That would be really super. What happened to Ace's hat? They picked it up after he was killed, right? Yeah, they did. It's on the grave. It's on the grave. Yes, you have Whitebeard's grave with one of the 12 greatest swords of all time on it. And then you have Ace's grave with one of the 12 greatest hats of all time on it, right? What were we talking about again? Right, no, Franky. This is a Franky video. We're not talking about Ace's hat. All right, so here's the deal, okay? We're going to talk about all the different upgrades Franky could have and should have gotten by this point in the story, okay? Because it wasn't really until Wano happened that I started to notice this, all right? Franky is very unique because alongside Usopp, I guess Nami as well a little bit, their powers do not necessarily level up because they don't have devil fruits, so it's not like, oh, I learned a new thing with my devil fruit ability or something like that. Usopp levels up when, he figures out a new technique or develops a new piece of ammo to fire out of his Kabuto, or he has observation hockey, obviously. Nami's the same way, like Usopp will tinker with the climb attack to get her a new weapon. Zeus is in there now. And then Franky also is always inventing new gadgets and things to use in his cyborg body, his armored me, right? Okay? So there were so many opportunities in the last two arcs, in Wano and in Egghead, where Franky could have gotten a boatload of upgrades that would have made him such a cooler character in battle, and I really question why it didn't go that way. Maybe Oda just didn't think about it. I really like to think it was just a simple oversight on his part, and he just didn't. Maybe he was just really busy with a lot of other stuff going on, and Franky just kind of fell by the wayside. But it's a real shame, man. It is, because Franky could have been decked out like crazy right now. Okay, so up until Dressrosa, I think everything is good. Well, including Dressrosa, right? Because after the time skip, we had to take a few story arcs to get used to the Straw Hats upgrades from the 2 years. Franky, more so than a lot of the other Straw Hats, had a lot of different changes about him. His overall design was the most different out of all of the Straw Hats. And I remember a lot of people after the time skip, not feeling Franky's new design. A lot of people didn't like the giant shoulder orbs, which, by the way, if you look at the newest chapter when he's wearing the leather jacket, his shoulder orbs seem to have shrunk a little bit. So maybe Franky has different sizes that he could switch out or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Franky had a bunch of new gadgets. He had a radical beam, his fire got upgraded to the fireball technique. He could use that. His legs could turn into tank treads. He had nipple lights. He had all these different moves and everything like that. And that was like with a lot of the Straw Hats. Like Luffy had Gear 4th right after the time skip. Like Luffy could have used Gear 4th during Sabaody or during Fishman Island or during Punk Hazard, but it wasn't really until Dressrosa when they encountered enemies, the Doflamingo family, that were on enough of a level to showcase the fullest extent of their training over the 2 years. So the first real serious fight that Franky had since the time skip was when he brawled with Senor Pink. Senor Pink wrecked Franky's shit pretty badly. All right, he did that suplex down. Franky got up. He's buzzing and glitching out, and the electricity shorting out, and his eye was doing the Terminator thing, and he was glowing. And, Franky's like, oh, okay, that's how we're doing this? All right. And then he busts out the Franky Iron Boxing, and he was able to beat down Senor Pink. But Senor Pink did some sizable damage to Franky. Let's not forget this, okay? So moving on from Dressrosa, we had Zoe, not a very long story arc. We have Whole Cake Island, where Franky was not there. Okay, fine. So then we come to Wano. And Wano had some interesting stuff that Franky could have definitely picked up at the end of the arc, okay? So we go through the arc. Franky is a local shipwright for a little while with Minatomo, who's actually currently missing in the cover page, so we'll find out what happens with him. But anyway, raid on Onigashima happens, fights against Sasaki. That fight was okay. It was fine. I mean, Franky used the Shogun, and the Shogun actually got destroyed there. First time the Shogun was ever just straight up like destroyed by an enemy, which by the way should have been an indication right there, like, okay, Franky was still able to beat Sasaki, he was still able to win, but he lost the Shogun in that fight. So that should have been a wake-up call for Franky, like, okay, I'm good, but I don't know how many more fights I can have. I don't know how many more strong enemies we could face with the level of technology I just have from the 2 years that I trained on Baltimore. I need to upgrade my shit, like, big time, okay? So he does fix up the Shogun. You see it by the end of Wano. It's refurbished and it's ready to go. He didn't give it a new number or anything. It's still Battle Franky 38. So, you know, he has that. Okay, great. But no indication that he upgraded the Shogun with anything special or unique. He might have. And in fact, I hope Oda still does that. I guess there is still an opportunity, because Franky didn't really have a lot of time to shine during Egghead, so maybe we could, you know, like, oh, by the way, Franky installed this into the Shogun back at Wano the whole time. We just didn't know about it. Whatever. So he finishes Sasaki off with the Victory V Slice. It was a new move, but all it was he took out Franken, the sword Franken, and then just V-shape attack. That's all he really did with it, and that's how he beat Sasaki. Now, Sasaki himself wasn't a very well-developed character, so whatever, fine. But, after the battle at Onigashima was done, after the Straw Hats recovered, after everything was good on Wano now, Momonosuke's the new Shogun, Orochi is dead after they killed him 9 damn times, Kaido and Big Mom are in a volcano, all the strongest member of the Beast Pirates are in the Udon prison, you know, everything is said and done. Franky could have gotten his hands on a truckload, a train yard filled load of Sea Prism weapons. Orochi and Kaido built hundreds of refineries and factories all over Wano, and they enslaved the population to make weapons day after day. Now, they shut down all those factories after Orochi and Kaido had been disposed of, but all of the weapons are still there, man. Like, you even saw it at Udon. They had these giant Sea Prism chains that they were wrapping up Big Mom in. Armadillo Man, who was just like a regular gifter, he wasn't even significant, had Sea Prism bullets that he was firing off. Do you know how rare Sea Prism bullets are in this world? Wano is the place where Sea Prism is mined, where it's refined. You can make fine objects out of that. Early on in the arc, for God's sake, Hawkins used a Sea Prism nail against Law. A Sea Prism nail. Oh man, if only Franky had some kind of technique where he shoots literal nails out of his mouth. Oh wait, he does! He only used it one time in the manga, I think, but he does have that. He shoots nails out of his mouth. Just load up the Sea Prism nails. There was only one Sea Prism nail. Sorry, man. There was only one of those nails in the entirety of Wano. No, it was an indication to show that Sea Prism is rare in most parts of the world, but here, there's a bunch of it. There's like a giant, like vein of Sea Prism ore under Wano or some shit, and it's mined here constantly, and the artisans of Wano are really the only people in the entire world, maybe aside from like Egghead and some people that work in the Marines, that are able to refine it and make it into like objects like nails and bullets, like really small, very specifically. Like a bullet has to be designed in a very specific shape or it's not going to work right? Okay, Wano's the place where all that happens. So dude, this isn't even hard at this point, right? Like, Franky is just like, okay, well, all the factories are shut down. Hey, Momonosuke, do you mind if I just go in those factories and take, like, a few dozen crates of Sea Prism weapons with us? Why would Momonosuke say no to that? Like, you saved our entire country. Take whatever you want. If anything, it's just a leftover reminder of the oppression that Orochi did for us. You know, if anything else, I think all of the people that were working in the factories would want the weapons that they made to at least go to their national heroes that saved them from a giant dragon despot, you know? Like, hey, we freed all of these people from the factories. They don't have to work in hard labor anymore. But yeah, there's like crates of sea prism weapons and not just bullets and nails, but like spears and swords and just raw sea prism as well. So Franky, weapons left. Load up some sea prism bullets in that. And I mean, like, it's one of those things where, you know, there's like a certain amount of it, you know, so like how realistic do you take this? Like when it comes to Usopp's pop greens, that's actually a really cool thing that Oda referenced, where he has a set number of pop greens, but they're also living plants. So he has a little garden on the Sunny that he uses to grow new pop greens. So that's where his supply is coming from, right? Now with Franky, you know, once you use up your supply of sea prism bullets, you're out. But like with all of the extra supply that would have existed in the factories at Wano, Franky could have taken enough crates of those on the Sunny that you could have effectively said for the rest of the manga, he's got essentially an infinite supply of bullets. There doesn't have to be a moment where it's like Franky ran out of sea prism bullets, he can't use any anymore. You just take a couple of giant crates onto the Sunny, couple, like, you know, you could, I don't know, thousands, like 5,000-10,000 bullets, like you'd be fine, right? There's enough room on the Sunny for all that shit, right? You know, so, you know, you have that. You could have done something like with Zephyr in Film Z. So Zephyr has this giant mechanical gauntlet arm that he has when his real arm got sliced off, right? And so, you know, maybe not to the extravagance that Zephyr had it, but Franky could have definitely, like, even if he didn't want those sea prism bullets, just get like a big chunk of sea prism chain, which existed, and then just wrap that around your arm and just strong right, boom, and just punching people with a sea prism chain like brass knuckle on your arm, or just like tying it around his arm and just smacking people around with it. You know what I mean? That would have been something that would have been insanely useful. Just a big raw, not doesn't even have to be a chain, just a raw chunk of sea prism just to tie to yourself and just smack people with, right? Franky shoulder check, boom, just run into somebody like a quarterback, you know, like you're playing rugby or football, or, you know, American football now, not soccer, American football now, right? So let's see here. We got bullets, we got nails, we got various bladed weaponry. Oh yeah, the Franky Shogun uses a sword. So you can, like, not even like the whole sword made out of sea prism, but like you could take sea prism and like just coat it along the edge. There's also artisans in the country that know how to make this shit. I mean, Franky himself is an artisan. He's an engineer. He knows how to do this kind of stuff, but this stuff is very specific. So if he would have taken some sea prism to Minatomo or somebody else on the island that knows what they're doing and be like, hey, before we go on our adventure, which is going to be really treacherous, we're going into the deepest depths of the new world here, we're trying to find the fucking One Piece, like, we're going to go to some really dangerous places. We might have to fight people on the level of, if not stronger than Kaido. So I found all this sea prism in the factory. Can you, like, make a sea prism sword that I can install on Franken, or a Franken, like, upgrade to put on the Shogun? Or can you give me, like, some extra sea prism gauntlets to attach to the Shogun? So, like, the Shogun's fists are, like, made out of sea prism, or maybe, like, sea prism brass knuckles or something. Like, I'm sure they would have done that for Franky. I'm sure they easily would have done that because of all the help that they did, right? Let's see. Yeah, but, you know, just, I'm not going to go over into it, like, every single thing that Franky could make out of sea prism, but let's just be straight up here. There was so much of this material in the place that it was mined primarily that Franky should be decked out to the gills with sea prism blades and weapons and bullets by now. Like, there should be no excuse for that, right? But that's not even the worst of it in terms of, like, a missed opportunity, okay? Because then we get to Egghead. And let me tell you, me just writing down some of these ideas of, like, what Franky could get in terms of upgrades when he got to Egghead, I really hope, like, even though we didn't see it during Egghead, I want to see Franky have some of this stuff, even if he just has it out of nowhere. Now, granted, Lilith is still traveling with the Straw Hats. Now, you know, she doesn't have the lab anymore, but maybe Lilith could still give some, you know, adjustments to Franky's devices, as it were. Not in that way, although, you know, I always used to ship Franky and Robin, but Franky and Lilith, though. It's like, okay, all right, so Franky does look up to Vegapunk after all. Just like, okay. So let's start simple. Let's start simple with this, okay? Franky can't fly. He's a really heavy guy, so he doesn't really have a lot of maneuverability. In fact, when Oda listed all of the Straw Hats in like a running competition, like track or like the 100-meter dash or whatever, Franky was always the slowest. So maybe an upgrade to his mobility, his agility would definitely be good. Now, you have the Dom shoes while you're on Egghead, and a lot of the technology on Egghead was kind of explained away like, oh, this stuff only works in Egghead's climate. So it's like, we can't just pick up the ship with Vega Force 1 and then fly off to wherever we want to go. After you leave Egghead's airspace, it stops functioning. I'm imagining it's something similar with the Dom shoes. You know, they won't be able to just use the Dom shoes to fly around wherever. That's okay, though, because Franky has an alternate power source that Vegapunks never thought of, and that's Cola power. Remember when the Straw Hats got down from Skypiea, like initially, right after they landed, and Nami tried to use the Milky Dial on the Blue Sea, and it just didn't work. The clouds, like, immediately dissolved. Well, after training on Weatheria for 2 years, Nami figured out a way to adjust the cloud's composition or whatever with her Climatact, and so the Milky Road can now exist on the Blue Sea. That was her upgrade. I thought that was really cool. Like, yeah, just because something didn't work initially doesn't mean you can't tinker with it. So what if Franky, you know, he has his Dom shoes from the arc, and he's like, oh man, I want these to work. I would really like to fly because that'd be really useful. And Lilith is like, yeah, sorry, I just couldn't get them to work outside of Egghead because of the climate's not right, and maybe the power source didn't work. And Franky's like, well, what if I try running them on Cola power? And Franky could make some adjustments, and this is like a fantasy story. You could easily have it be like Franky uses his Cola to give himself a cool jetpack, or Franky uses his Cola to modify the Dom shoes to get him to fly around for a little bit. It might only be for a limited amount of time, like he can't fly around indefinitely or something like that, but giving an upgrade to Franky's mobility would definitely be warranted right about now, right? Okay. Moving on to something else that's also very, very simple that Franky could have gotten as an upgrade, the Radical Beam. So the Radical Beam that Franky has was developed in Vegapunk's lab at Baltimore back in his younger years. Back when probably he was even, before Mads was even invented, right? This was back when Vegapunk was like in his 20s, I think, was when he was living on Baltimore with all these inventions, right? So Franky's like, oh, laser technology, cool, I'm gonna do that. Which also, I guess, shows that Vegapunk was even doing Devil Fruit technology research even back in those days, right? Before I guess he even really met Kizaru. Interesting. So Franky developed, you know, the Radical Beam. So he needs both hands in order to charge it and fire it. He specifically mentions that at Punk Hazard. Like, I need 2 hands to use the Radical Beam, okay? All right, well, I mean, that's an easy upgrade right there. Just make it so he could fire the lasers out of both hands like the pacifistas do. That's not even that big of an upgrade, right? That's not even that, like, whoa, Franky firing 2 lasers at the same time? Holy crap, Oda couldn't have done that. It would have made him way too broken. Nah, we're at a point in the story now. The original prototype pacifistas could have fired 3 at once. They could fire 2 out of both of their hands and 1 out of their mouth. Have Franky, like, okay, I figured out, just adjust this, pshoo, laser, pshoo, laser. Have Franky fire a laser out of his mouth. Have him fire a laser out of his butt. You know Franky would have done that. You know Franky would have had the idea, like, wait a minute, let me fire a laser out of my ass. And you know what? I would have been happy with that. I'd been like, oh, okay, I want to see where this goes. You know, Franky nipple lasers. You know, like, we could have definitely had that. Just the upgrade could have been him being able to fly, increase his mobility, and fire lasers out of like 17 points in his body. And I think we would have been good. That could have been all that would have been the upgrades, but still, that would have been great. But we got more upgrades for you. Okay, so aside from copious lasers, we had the bubble technology. So Lilith used a bubble bazooka, and also the Pacifista Mark IIIs used the bubble shields. Now, this technology, I bet, was not just because of Egghead's climate. These Mark IIIs were going to be shipped all over the world to be the new upgrade of the Pacifista. So those bubble shields had to have worked outside of Egghead, because that was the whole point. What would have been the point of, like, yes, I have developed a brand new set of Pacifistas, Quasar. They have an indestructible bubble shield. but it can only work on my island. Every time they go off the island, it doesn't work. So Franky taking the bubble technology, firing the bubble spheres, kind of like Sea Stone. I mean, it is, you know, trapping Devil Fruit users in the bubbles. Like Franky has a bubble launcher, but it's really effective. That'd be cool. Or Franky just pulling out the bubble shield, but like in the shape of a star. So Franky has the stars on his like gauntlets. He presses a button and then just like whoop, like a star-shaped bubble pops out and just like blocks pretty much any attack. Like it like redirects missile fire and shit like that. That would have been really fun. The gunpowder flowers. We saw Hibari use the gunpowder rounds against the pirates on Hachinosu. Franky could have gotten some of those, so now he has extra ammo. He's got his regular ammo, he's got sea prism bullets, and now he's got the gunpowder bullets where he fires them off and the flowers pop out of the areas, like just negating an entire army's use of guns right then and there. Once again, I mean, the Straw Hats are so damn strong at this point, they don't really need to be afraid of, like, regular firearms. You know, like, they're, oh, no, someone's gonna shoot the Straw Hats. Look out, Chopper, somebody's got a gun. It's like, Chopper's fine. You know, he's okay. You know, but still, having the gunpowder, you know, rounds would have been pretty useful. I think the GP flowers. Now... Well, okay, one more of the thing. Bonnie's lightsaber. She had the lightsaber in the junkyard. Franky having a lightsaber, man. It doesn't even have to be an actual lightsaber that he pulls out, although that would have been cool. He could literally just have like a on his wrist and then just lightsaber comes out. And you know what? It can even still have the negative effects of the insects being drawn to the location, because I don't think Franky gives a shit about being covered in bugs. It'd be funny if Franky uses the technique and then Nami and Sanji freak out when all the bugs show up, but like for Franky and Usopp and Chopper, I don't think they would care. I think they would love it, actually. Like, they like little like Hercules beetle would fly in and Usopp would be like, oh, that's so cool, Franky, you can attract bugs with that technique. Yeah, it's pretty awesome, isn't it? Franky accidentally slicing things apart, and then he's a shipwright, so he fixes it right back up. The hilarity writes itself. But here's something. Dude, this one's probably, up until now, honestly, all of these upgrades that I'm throwing out there, you might argue might make Franky a little bit OP, but I think considering Luffy has freaking Gear 5th right now, and Zoro has Conqueror's Haki, Nami even has a fragment of a Yonko's soul living inside of her magical rod. All of this stuff, Brook can channel the powers of the underworld through rock and roll. Chopper can turn into a monster. Jinbei is just an expert in all forms of martial arts, and he's got crazy powerful haki. Usopp could fire seeds at people. Sanji's got the upgrade to his skin with the Germa tech. He's got Ifrit Jambe now. Like Robin could go into Demonio. Like all these upgrades the Straw Hats have. What does Franky get? I'd say any of these is not even that OP. I don't think any of the things I've mentioned up until now would make Franky all that broken, right? Like upgrades to his shield, more lasers, being able to fly. I don't think that makes Franky some incredibly broken character. If anything, it puts him more on the level of the other Straw Hats that all got upgrades. This one could make it broken, but I would like the idea. How would you feel about this? So you got the green blood technology. You got the technology that Vegapunk took Paramecia Devil Fruit abilities, diluted it down into a chemical called green blood that he then loaded into the Seraphim, and now the Seraphim have those Devil Fruit abilities. So Mihawk S. Hawk has the Dice Fruit of Mr. One, right? And then Jinbei's Seraphim S. Shark has the Swim Fruit, which is what Senor Pink had. There's also the other Seraphim, so we don't know which ones those have. The Seraphim version of Moria probably has the Kage Kage no Mi. Crocodile's Seraphim would not have the San Fruit because that's a Logia, so that'd be a different one. Doflamingo's probably has the Ito no Mi. So yeah, they probably have their Paramecias too. So there is a lab somewhere on Egghead that would just have a bunch of green blood vials. Wouldn't it be cool if Franky developed some kind of device where he could take a cartridge of green blood, load it inside of himself, or maybe even in his fridge. He takes the green blood and just like installs it in his fridge, and for a limited amount of time, not permanently, but for a limited amount of time, Franky can use that Devil Fruit ability, or he could use like one attack in that Devil Fruit ability. All right, but in the meantime, he's also maybe weakened by Devil Fruit weaknesses, but it's only temporary. because that's what green blood is. It's like a chemical, right? So as long as he doesn't like synthesize it into his own blood, he just like loads it into a cartridge and then like can make his arm turn into a blade for like one attack, and then the cartridge, you know, like pops out of his arm, and it's all like all the green blood is used up, and he has to like discard the cartridge. So he couldn't use it very often because there's only a limited amount of green blood. This would not be like with the C Prism bullets where you could have like 10,000 rounds he could have taken from the factories. Maybe Franky could only load up on like maybe a few dozen of these vials, and so he has to be very careful when he uses it, because when he uses it all up, it's gone, right? Kind of thing like that. But he could have gotten his hands on a bunch of it. At the very least, Franky could have gotten some vials of green blood that would have contained the Dice fruit, the Swim fruit, which would have been cool because that's Senor Pink's, and Senor Pink and Franky are like bonded. They are like brothers. Yeah, Franky could have gotten the Love fruit. Just he could have gotten that, and he could have gotten the Pawpaw fruit too, which would have been really broken, really powerful. But maybe only use it like once. Like he injects the Pawpaw fruit into him, and he can use like one rejection attack, and then that's it. And then just like that's out. He's out of that one use. Okay. That would have been cool. That would have been fun. That would have been really cool. And even without that idea, though, all these other ideas we didn't really get a chance to see. Now, we still could. We still could. When Franky busts out the Franky Shogun at Elbaph, or when he seriously fights somebody at Elbaph, maybe, you know, Oda could just throw a thing in where Franky's like, glad I picked up some C Prism bullets at Wano. And I would just be like, okay, you know what? It was never mentioned. It was never shown. But I'm okay with this. He has C Prism bullets now, right? Makes sense to me. Let's go. There was also that attack he used during the fight with Marcus Mars, where Luffy was in Gear 5th, and he was like, okay, everybody, use Haki. And Franky uses, like, impactful strong right. And the question is, like, was that a Haki move that Franky used? But the thing is, like, I mean, armament Haki would be Franky's thing, but, like, he doesn't even need it. That's the thing. He doesn't even need armament Haki. With all this stuff he could have gotten his hands on, with all the C Prism swag, you don't need any armament Haki. So I don't think that was, I mean, it was never confirmed it was armament. Volume 110 is coming out soon. The new SBS is going to be out probably this week. So I'm actually curious if any questions will pop up involving Franky using Haki, or any upgrades he might have gotten during Egghead. Like, hey, Oda, Franky should have gotten some stuff. And maybe Oda would be like, well, I guess you're just going to have to wait and see. Maybe Franky picked up a few things before he left. God, I hope so. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. That was leather jacket and cowboy hat teching. And here, right here, is Vampire Barry. He's a plushie that you could go buy at Spring down below in the link. So go check that out as well. Super!